And we are live with the first virtually connecting session with Open Ed in Anaheim, California. My name is Christian. I'm your virtual buddy for this session from Hamburg in Germany. And I think we should start, as always, with a short introduction from folks on site and then bring it to the virtual folks.
Sure. My name is Tom Evans. I work with Open Learning at Ohio State University. And just blown away by the amazing stuff going on this week. It's too hard to say.
Hi, this is Walji. I'm from the University of Cape Town in South Africa, and I'm part of the Research on Open Education project, WORF-D.
I'm Henry Trotter. I'm also with ROAR4D as a researcher and editorial manager.
All right. Beck, do you want to start? Then Helen, Meha, and Sally.
Yeah, sure, thanks. Hi, I'm Beck Pitt, and I'm a researcher with the OER Hub here at the Open University in Milton Keynes in the United Kingdom.
Hi, I'm Helen DeWard. I'm an instructor here in Central Ontario in a Faculty of Education, so I'm teaching new teachers.
They want you to introduce yourself. Oh, okay. Hi. I'm Terry. I'm at eCampus Ontario as a program manager. But I'm in Anaheim, obviously. Sorry. Comfortable being off camera.
Meha, and then Sally, maybe?
Okay. Hi, I'm Meha Beli from the American University in Cairo in Egypt.
And Sally.
Hi, I'm Sally P. Whairangi from Auckland University Technology in New Zealand.
All right. So we've seen lots of tweets today and lots of both from I think you've had two really amazing keynotes by David Walji and then from Kathy. So what's your first impressions of the day?
Well, a great way to start or to finalize this conference, a great way to start the morning. David Walji, again, with very provocative insights into the nature of the commons and the relationship between openness and the commons and how management of commons is crucial. He highlighted work done by Evelyn Ostrom and pioneering work there, but also related the perils that commons face from commercialization, from our own misunderstanding of how commons work and what they are, and how important sociality is to the commons. So that was great from David Walji, but I'll let someone pick up with Kathy.
I was quite struck from David Walji, and it sounds so obvious in a way that he was saying that the commons is not about resource. It's not that there are resources, but it's actually a system that is commoning. So it's a verb, and the system is a social system with its norms and rules, traditions, languages, I suppose, even, and that not giving attention to that element and just focusing on commons as a resource is possibly some of the reasons why we are stuck in areas. So he was talking about almost like a conceptual framework for looking at, considering new ways of looking at existing problems, and I thought that was quite an important point to make.
Can I ask a clarification question? So by that, do you mean that, for example, questions of equity and access should be not access to the resources, but access to the entire community and the process and that kind of thing? Is that what you're talking about?
It's almost like, yes, access to resources might be one of the ways, but it's how do you get to the access to the resources? There's a rule or a governance or a method behind that, and that is part of the social system that is commoning. I mean, the resource is just a small part of it. Does that clarify things? Okay.
And I could think Kathy sort of extended that to access to the community in some sense, just further resonating themes of social equity, social justice and equity in our spaces here as at conferences and things like that, just reminding ourselves of the privileges that we have. Kathy had mentioned about when we were striving to make spaces for inclusivity, questions that we need to be having on our minds at all times, such as who has a voice, whose voice is louder, whose voice is softer but should be louder, whose voice is louder but should maybe be softer, who is invisible in the room, and is silence actually agreement or not? How do people feel empowered to raise up disagreements or making a safe space for that? And then kind of defining who are the leaders, who are the champions.
And who is actually not in the room.
Right, that needs to
and
be.
Why.
It's a very useful challenge to us in the open education community. She used the metaphor that we are now adolescents in the OER community, that we've survived infancy and the terrible twos, as she said, and now we're in infancy. And one of the challenges with, we're now in adolescence, and one of the challenges with adolescence is that the nodes that we have all proliferated through this open community threaten to be fractured, and groups can go off and become cliques and isolated from each other. And she said that must be overcome. We must continue to grow this network, survive adolescence and mature, but continue to expand our nodes outwards, especially for inclusivity, to bring in more voices that we just heard.
And I think there are contradictions, and I found myself sitting at this conference for the past 2.5 days, feeling that there are so many contradictions, partly about it being here at Disneyland and being in a country which is, I'm sure many people couldn't come because of the visa restrictions as well as other things. But also, from our point of view, or my point of view, representing a Global South research project and seeing how few people there are here from the Global South. I know that this is very much a North American focused conference, and that's absolutely fine, but it was, there have been so many kind of contradictions or kind of questions as I've been sitting through the sessions and also talking about our own work here. But that what Kathy was saying around the nodes growing and that you have to welcome diversity in, because if you don't, then the movement risks splitting off. But I was also thinking that practically, if you are going to value diversity and localization and contextualization, there's inevitably going to be some kind of sub-movements so that there isn't that hegemony I'm on can the center hold? I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, I'm just wondering. So these are just things that have bubbled up as I've been
sub-movements
thinking.
They're not going to be a bad thing necessarily, no.
No.
I just think of music, all the subgenres are more exciting, and they come from hearing each other and putting them together. It could be some great sub-movements that come up, as long as they're not fractured, like you said.
Have there been lots of narratives around innovation in that regard as well? Because in my head, there are two things that I connected with. The first one is, I think, Mahas, your various blog posts on an open door is not an invitation, that kind of thing on the one hand, but also the keynote at DML just last year, pretty close to where you're at right now, where Henry Jenkins talked to Ezra El Shafei, if I pronounce her, I don't think I'm even pronouncing that remotely right, but when she said that her view upon both North America, and I think she included Europe in there as well, was not as a producer of innovations anymore because of this lack of diversity, for example, and this kind of laying back and look what we have done so far. So this, and I see that as a danger of what is often called mainstreaming, right? So has there been any discussion around from that perspective as well?
Certainly in Kathy Cassidy's keynote, she was talking, and also David Bollier's around using commons as a different way of looking at things for innovation. But yes, around bringing new ways of thinking and new ways of doing and new people, she particularly mentioned young people coming in and not just, keeping listening to the elders now of the movement. And it was linked to kind of innovation from that. Not so much technology innovation, but more kind of business model, almost like a process innovation, and that things don't have to be done the same way just because we've done them like this up to now.
She made an interesting distinction between leaders and champions, saying that the leadership are those on the dais, those who are speaking at keynotes, but the champions, OER champions, are those on the ground. And this conference has had a lot of opportunities to engage with people on the ground, especially in community colleges. That's been highly represented here. And from our context in South Africa, where there is no community college element, it has been very enlightening, very informative, and we've seen so many innovative ideas going on in the community college sector from OER champions that we think would be very valuable in our context. So there has been a little bit, if there is stagnation from the global north, it might be more at the leadership level than at the champion level, because I did see a lot of innovative thinking and tinkering and experimentation going on by practitioners at their various institutions.
I think it's hard trying to, as a champion, so to speak, on the ground, pushing forward with, movements of OER and reshaping, faculty's perceptions is a lot of what I do. It's hard to kind of break that status quo, from that leadership level. So I'm interested in understanding what are some strategies, and that's what I've been kind of trying to key into.
I think Maha and Helen, you both made some good points in the chat. Do you want to make them in audio as well?
I was just saying that when people talk about diversity and inclusion and all that, do they recognize the kinds of tensions that come with that? Do they address that when they mention, let's include people? Do they address the kind of tensions and challenges that come with diversity? It's not like just something that's nice to have and then you have it and you're good. Actually, as soon as you start having it, new challenges that you didn't predict come along. I mean, I'm talking to the people from South Africa, so they already know that much, much better than a lot of other people.
Well, an example that just struck me. So there's been a lot of talk about inclusion and diversity in the way that you organize conferences. And what struck me with this one is that there were a few sessions from people in the Global South, very few, but some, Henry's in particular, and a few others, but they were all scheduled against each other. So for the whole fact that you have 3 days and they put them all against each other, so we couldn't go to each other. So it was almost like, let's put all the Global South people together in the same slot. And I was just thinking, well, that's a real shame.
Well, you would think that they would actually do a theme that is called that, so that they would remember not to put them in the same place, and they would invite people then to have a whole theme for you.
And I thought, why would you even do that? Is it because it's almost like people who want to go to, but you wouldn't want to go to more than one, so you put them all against each other?
I didn't think of it.
Yeah, so that, to me, that was thoughtlessness. Yeah. So even though people might say we're very inclusive and we want people from different contexts, maybe having somebody to look at the scheduling or be part of the committee even for organizing that would be good. So there was the person from Ethiopia and the person from your session, and they were all, and I was like so frustrated because it was just such a missed opportunity. There's little enough of it as it is at this conference. So I think from that, and that is feedback that I will give as part of the
That reminds me of just yesterday, right here, we had Cable Green and Ryan York creative comments in here talking about how they plan for their global summit, and they have whoever, there was 40 people, and it ended up having much more diversity in their keynotes. And I was at the summit last year, and they were like the most memorable keynotes were from not white men, so they were fantastic. So it was probably because of the way they set up their planning. So maybe OpenEd could learn a thing or two from.
And this is what Kath Casserly mentioned at Spark, the group Spark. They have like a directive for equity inclusion for their conference guidelines.
Yeah.
So that key questions, as you're mentioning, come up beforehand and are addressed beforehand. And that's something perhaps this conference or any other conference should adopt as well.
Yeah, I think they have a great example. I just recently looked at it because I'm attending OpenCon in, I think, a month or so from now in Berlin. I got there on the wait list, and I'm quite excited about that. And I looked at it's almost like a 10 or 12 page memorandum on diversity and how they want to foster it in many, many ways, structurally, institutionally, from a content perspective, and so on and so forth. So let me see if I can find that link as well.
I got knocked off the wait list. Thanks for reminding me.
I'm sorry about that. I didn't expect to be able to go there, but I'll have to pull some strings to make it happen.
We're not going.
What, Kathy? What's your last name? Casserly. She mentioned the Global South a few times.
She did. Yeah.
You're from there. What's your feeling about issues?
Yeah, no, it was very, I mean, it's a useful reminder. I mean, what she was saying was she was talking about the inception of the open education movement, and that very early on, the thought leaders in those early days, and I think she mentioned there were like 35 people who got together, and then UNESCO got involved and invited people from the Global South. They were very conscious that this movement should not be a kind of colonialism again, where content and resources are provided from the Global North to the Global South. So she acknowledged that was very much one of the aims of the open movement, the OER movement, right from the beginning. And that's something that I suppose continues to be a foundational principle. But she also acknowledged that operationalizing it is around resources and funding, and who, and it just comes down to who is where. So I suppose you can have champions and leaders who espouse that and try and work towards that. But I suppose what's difficult is that the system and structures that are already in place, they need to be kind of looked at again, I suppose, in terms of what, things like we just talked about it, conferences, where they are, how they're scheduled, but also just the kind of the awareness of what is in the global South that might be of use to the global North, and there may be innovations coming out there in terms of how to do things around, which is the thing that we're all trying to do, which is to provide more equitable access to educational provision to everybody. Does anyone from the virtual participants want to ask anything else?
I'm really struck by living in that tension and finding a way past that tension because we're each accountable for making the first step across the divide or whatever it is. And how do we do that consciously, intentionally, to invite people who may not feel like they belong? Some thoughts from you or from the keynote.
Well, that's very interesting. Well, there was a moment earlier in the conference, opening the conference keynote, was a group of students who came with members of the faculty from their community college. And these students spoke about using OER in their classrooms and for some of their courses. And they were the only, obviously identifiable students in the crowd, and they might have felt, oh, we don't belong here, these are academics, etc. But they brought with them such a fresh perspective and were made to feel welcome, in part because of the excitement of the ideas that they generated for all of us. And they faced challenges that many other students face, and we're representative in many ways of the kind of student body out there that the OER community is trying to serve. To hear them and to have them included was kind of like a lightning rod for everybody emotionally and intellectually. So depending on how they're brought in, I think matters. Including them, finding a space for them to speak, valuing their input, and really thinking deeply about it and engaging with it. I think that's maybe a key way to bring in people who may feel that they're not part of this group, and it just helps us as well to make sure that we include different voices within that community, make a space for them.
And it was great that they were at the opening, right at the beginning, rather than, at the end or, something. And they, keynoted effectively, all of them together, and they were absolutely incredible.
And they're locals.
Yes. And then they had no fear and didn't hold back.
I wanted to know.
At all, and that's probably one of the things I like most about this conference.
Yeah, well,
it's one of the pieces I'm struggling with, because I'm going to the online learning, the World Online Learning Conference next week in Toronto, and it's a world conference, and think, how can I invite those disparate voices, those disengaged, those who don't feel like they're connecting, into virtually connecting conversations like this. So I want to make sure that I extend that hospitality beyond the conference walls. And how do you engage in it when people don't really know what you're talking about?
I think you invite first, and then you just create the conditions of being welcome, and try to have the understanding there are some people who don't want to speak. There are some people who do want to speak and have a voice, and some people are trying to figure out what their voice is. And having just creating that atmosphere of a safe space, and it is just so important.
Yesterday afternoon there was an unconference at Roland Mo. They did a speed networking where we had switched tables every 10 minutes, and you had 1 minute at each table to say your spiel on open. And that was cool because I practiced my spiel like 5-6 times, and now it's more ready. When I go back, run into some students or people who don't know anything, it's more on the tip of my tongue, ready to. So that was probably one of the most effective things for me here, and let alone meeting all those people. It was fun. It's fun to get a break away from those 25-minute blasts of sessions where it starts to feel like preaching to the choir after a while, where let's go talk to people who aren't here with our elevator speeches or whatever you call them.
So that's a good tip in terms of giving people something to do, so they're contributing rather than listening, even if it's a quick
talking back
something,
to each other. Turn around.
Yeah. What's on your mind or something. So there's a little structure. I find that helps because, when I'm going into a new situation, I'm already quite nervous. So actually having a bit of something to contribute breaks the ice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also I think you also sometimes are endangered of tokenizing to some extent. So, and I personally have the feeling that quite often you will find yourself in contexts that actually, as you said, Maha, do not welcome that tension around diversity, that pain that sometimes people will also have, and trying to build that bridge between, on the one hand, those you want to include, and on the other hand, the institution can really quickly beat students, beat people from the global south or from elsewhere, with any kind of context or background. Sometimes people will let you know now, okay, this level of diversity, this level of inclusion is enough now, and that really feels like you're not even halfway there. So I think I don't want to cut into anything right there, but I think you folks on site have to run to your next session, right? So, I mean, you're welcome to stay, of course, but we do not want to keep you from anything exciting going on site as well.
Cool. Okay.
Thank you for the chance to chat with you. It was fun.
Yeah, it's great. And Helen, we might see you next week. Henry and I will be in Toronto.
Awesome.
Perfect.
That's great. It's good to see you guys.
Yeah, too. Thank you.
So should we keep broadcasting, or do virtual folks still?
I can stay a little bit.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks to the on-site buddies as well, Terry and Tom. Thank you, and thanks to the guests.
So we can stay online a little bit more. We haven't heard from Sally and Beck in case they have something to say. There's something you were just saying right now, Christian. Oh, so one of the things I was going to say is that someone was describing to me a situation where they invited a panel where there were a lot of women on the panel, but like 2 of them canceled last minute. And one of the things I told that person is actually, yeah, you got to keep that in mind with women, because like if a woman's child gets sick, she's the one who's going to have to leave. And so it's more complex to invite, for example, women and then have to face that, but then you have to have a backup woman. You know, it's not that you say, oh, well, now I've only got one woman on my panel, what am I going to do? No, you have to have something else in mind. So now what are you going to do? You know, you don't just stop it. It's back to that thing of just not inviting and thinking about what are you going to do after that.
I was also wondering, in German, for German context, there's a website called speakerinnen.org, which basically means femalespeakers.org. So you can basically look up any kind of tag or anything like that, and it will just spit out female speakers who are qualified in that regard. Is there an equivalent in English as well? I've never seen it.
There's an OA Women Excel sheet, isn't there? Yeah. There's
okay.
And I added Sukaina to it, and someone had added me to it. And there's a country as well, so if you're looking for people who aren't from like North America or whatever, you can find that. I don't know if anybody uses it. I've added to it. I don't know if anybody actually uses it to find people. Do you know about that, Beck? Do you know if there are others?
I think that's the main list that I know of. I'm going to try and find the URL. I'll put it in the chat box if I can find it.
Yes, thanks.
We should also post it on Twitter again.
Yeah.
I know it keeps getting updated because I always find it in my recents, which is good.
Okay, great. I'll just put this in now.
Any other thoughts?
And this list is a global list.
Okay.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
Yeah, because one of the questions we had, one of the people that we wanted to invite to virtually connecting session next week at the conference was asking about her baby, and the immediate response was absolutely, you know, you're more than welcome. And I said that shouldn't be a barrier to participating in virtually connecting or any other conference.
Hmm. Over this weekend, I mean, that's another German example, sorry for that, but there's an unconference going on called EduCamp, and they are actually inviting whole families to tag along. So it's kind of a youth hostel kind of thing.
Oh,
And
neat.
I think they have somewhat around 20 kids, 12 or so below 10. So they are actually going to do sessions with them and work with them on certain issues.
Oh, with the kids?
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Okay, so here's the sheet.
And just looking at some of these lists and then thinking about the uncommon women, the T-shirt that was going around the conference, some of the conference tweets with uncommon women. So the Creative Commons Global Summit in Toronto had Women of the Commons. So they had a coloring book of all these women who are
Alan sent me that.
are active in the Creative Commons movement. In the organization. That was really interesting.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, OER 17 at the start of the FEMATech network, didn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Which reminds me of something the Open Ed MOOC that's happening right now with David Wiley and George Siemens. I don't know if you guys saw, but so I was going to ignore it. I had an idea to do something different with it. I was talking to Christiane about this. It reminds me of FEMATech, that's what I was going to say. And then I was like, a lot of people were blogging about it, so I decided not to ignore it because even though they're two white men, I mean, they really know what they're talking about most of the time. and then I saw their videos, and I liked the idea of them having a conversation, but I felt it was really cold. And so my response was to write a really emotional poem about open, because I felt like that, and one of the things I was feeling was that MOOC felt like it was missing something. I don't know if any of you have been watching the videos or following the MOOC. I'm not really following it too closely, but you were traveling, I know, Christian.
Yeah, I only saw the link list, and what I liked is the way of including those who, for example, don't want to log on to the platform. So you have the site where you have the links, you have subtitles of the videos and all that available, which is at least steps it up a notch compared to many other courses that I know of.
Right, and everything in so many different formats. So you can download the video, you can stream it, that was really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like the conversational style of those videos. That they're all talking about copyright and Creative Commons and you know that sort of thing. But yeah, you're right. It was it would be nice to have a similar conversation with a couple of women.
Yeah, but I think this is almost an obvious point. But I think like there was this conversation about what open means and what OER means by the beginning of this year, right? And I mean, we've all been more or less active parts in that, but I actually do believe that that conversation has, to some extent, shifted the way that open education MOOC, for example, is designed and presented to larger parts of the community. And I think lots of those, be it technical changes or changes in approaches to this whole MOOC thing, even if there are two white men, I think it kind of changed the way that they go at it to some extent. At least that's the impression that I got, but I'd like to know what you think about that. Okay, not sure what I mean. So what I mean is during these conversations around what does open mean to different people, I think there was there were lots of blog posts and lots of Twitter conversations, and actually Yumaha did even do the kind of, I think it wasn't a virtual connecting session, but a session that you ran yourself, right? So there were lots of conversations going on around who gets to define what open means and what open does and for whom.
So it was specifically about open pedagogy, right? So
yeah.
You mean the year of Open Hangout where we challenged
exactly.
the OER definition of open, yeah.
But what I think is, I mean, at that time, lots of people had in their backs of their heads, I think, that this course would be running, and I'm pretty sure they did. So I'm also pretty sure that it had some kind of impact on the way that they designed it, I would say. And I was just wondering whether you noticed anything like that, or whether you don't think that's actually happening.
Is anyone following it more closely than me? Because to me, they just look like they're doing what I think they would have done anyway. I think I'm trying to see if there's, I think a lot of the references they've used that I've noticed are just the regular references, the canonical type. I don't think I've noticed anything.
Okay.
But there might be something there that I haven't noticed. So it doesn't mean that it's not there. It's just that I haven't noticed anything obvious.
Yeah, nothing that I've noticed per se, but there may be things in the next couple of weeks that will shift my thinking a little bit as I'm trying to participate and read and join the conversation. But yeah, haven't seen it all yet.
No, I mean, because to be honest, that's what I was hoping for to some extent, and my guess is that you would have as well. So I haven't looked at it closely as I was traveling and all that, but would be nice.
To be fair, though, because it's originally an edX project, it's possible that their organizations or whoever asked them to do the MOOC, it was meant to be like an introductory type of thing, and maybe people think of introductory types of things as not the kind of thing we would like it to be. You know what I mean? Like we think of it as, you know, it's been years now and you know better, so let's do something different. But maybe if it's meant to be an introductory thing, it's not meant to do all those things. Or they might not see a place for including more controversy or diversity in the sense that we might be thinking of. But there's the open aspect of it that isn't inside edX, and that allows other people to bring in their vote. And I think they're aggregating the feeds. Or I'm not really sure how it's working, but I think they're aggregating. So that in itself is something, but it's not something innovative or new. A lot of people do that in their MOOCs. So, but what is in their actual main content that someone who will only log into edX see, I'm not sure if there's anything special or different.
Okay. So, any other comments from your side at all? Okay, Helen, you've got to run. Sally, back.
Just that I really enjoyed kind of getting an insight into what's been going on. I've been intermittently following the Twitter feed and getting a sense for the emerging discussions. And it's kind of interesting to hear. There's so much stuff. I would have the kind of some of the sessions. It would be good, particularly the student one and the Women of the Commons sessions. That would have been really good to get insight on that. I'm not sure it was covered in other Be Connecting, so I'll try and catch up on those if it was. But yeah, it's really interesting. I've really enjoyed the discussion with everyone, so thanks.
Thank you.
This is a new conversation for me. This isn't a space that I usually have participated in before, and it's not part of my work. So I just kind of thought that I'd jump in and see what the conversation's about, and to get overwhelmed with all of this stuff that in conversations that I haven't heard before. And I just think it's given me some good frameworks in which to think about my work and how I can learn more about what's happening in this space.
Okay.
It's great to have you.
Yeah, it was. Okay, then I think I should wrap it up, stop the broadcast. Thank you all for being online.